Hi, I'm Renée Walker, a mindset mentor, speaker, and lover of all things spiritual. I believe that at our core, we are all spiritually wired for love, peace, success, and abundance. Here on the podcast, we're diving into mindset, wellness, and business, but always through a spiritual lens. Let's just say we're going deep, but we're keeping it light. So let's elevate your life from the inside out, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. Okay, welcome to Spiritually Wired. I am especially excited about this episode today because I have the beautiful Marsha Vanwynsberghe with me today, and I am so looking forward to this conversation, Marsha. So thank you for taking the time to be with us.
I'm grateful to be here, Renee. I'm grateful to be a guest. It's fun being a guest. And I'm just like celebrating because I think more and more women need to get into the podcast space. There's so many messages to share. So I'm grateful to be here.
Love it, love it. And for those of you who do not know Marsha, Marsha is an NLP trainer. She is an author, a speaker, a podcaster, and also a boutique publisher. She is the 6-time best-selling author of When She Stopped Asking Why. And in this book, she shares her lessons as a parent who dealt with teen substance abuse, which is really where her journey and her business began. Through her tools, OUTSPOKEN NLP Coaching Certification, Write Your Damn Book Mastermind, still love that name, coaching programs, and Own Your Choices, Own Your Life podcast, Marsha teaches people how to reframe and reprogram their thoughts, beliefs, and stories to become outspoken. So welcome, Marsha. I really wanted to have you on as one of my first guests on this podcast. For me personally, I was able to really see some transformation, some healing through the use of NLP. So NLP being Neuro Linguistic Programming. And I remember that I had that personal experience. And then for me, I really felt like I wanted to learn more and become certified so that I could use those tools with my clients. And so I went searching for different certification programs and came across you. And this was probably about a year ago now. Mm-hmm. And so that was how I kind of came into your world. And, you know, out of all the different programs, I really resonated with you, your just genuine, authentic approach. And I just felt that we were really aligned in terms of the way in which you teach. And so it's been such a great year together of, I've had the opportunity to learn from you and to work with you. And we've done now some different collaborations and different things. But I thought that it would be great for you to come and maybe help us demystify this whole NLP thing, because I feel personally that before I started using it more in my own personal life, I had this idea that it was like this salesy, manipulative thing. And I want to put it out there right away because I know that there are people out there that still see it that way. So can you share with us what it is and maybe what it isn't?
I love that question. Yes, I feel that NLP, I had the belief for a long time that it was a sales program. Like it was literally a sales program. Maybe because that was my first experience with it, where people would say, it is to help you get better at sales. So it wasn't even really on my radar. And I can share that probably about 10 years ago, I started to really dive into the work of Tony Robbins. Yes, definitely masculine approach. And the one thing I learned from him was the power of state and the power of our words and our language. And I was in a really difficult part of my life and story, as you shared in the intro, and I was feeling stuck constantly. Like I couldn't feel, I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know what to do. And so when I really dove into Tony's work, it became a state of understanding what my words are, what I was saying. I didn't know that for almost like 6 years, I was learning NLP. I didn't understand that that's what NLP was.
Mm.
And he is really known as more of one of the modern teachers of NLP for putting it into our business and in our language. And then so fast forward, I had done a number of things in my own business. Like I'd written a number of books, I'd shared a number of talks, and I found myself in the hospital in 2020. I was having back surgery, and NLP came across my radar again. But this time was different. What it came across was teaching from like NLP is literally the language of the mind creating the world that you see around you. And I thought, okay, but great. Like my world right now is a hospital bed. And what am I doing? So I made this happen. I think that's a misconception when it comes to manifesting is this like we've deserved the bad things in our life because we're not manifesting right. And I think there's a lot of languaging around that as well. But to answer your question, it's like literally the language of your mind creating the world around you. And so there was something about that that spoke to me at that time. And also the piece that we are constantly holding so much of our emotions, our limiting beliefs in our subconscious mind, which you and I've had so many beautiful conversations about this spiritually and looking at it from seeing it from a different lens. And so NLP is looking at what are those stories, what are those pieces of our stories, our beliefs that we've held on to in our subconscious mind, and how can we rewrite it? I feel that there is a lot of languaging where it's that you're not being positive enough and that's why you don't have what you want. When actually you can work as hard as you want to create something and to create results. But if you don't subconsciously believe that it is possible, it won't happen. And that's where those limiting beliefs reside. So NLP is really getting to understanding the difference between our conscious mind, which is our 5%, and our subconscious mind, which is our 95%, which is where all of those limiting beliefs lie. They live there. So not addressing them and thinking that you just have to work harder to create results, you're missing 95% of the equation. And that is why I believe so many people are constantly hitting this state of burnout, trying to do things a certain way without addressing the reasons why they don't think it's possible in the first place.
Yes. Love that. And I love you, like it's so well described. It's the language of the mind that creates the world around you. So the whole conscious versus subconscious. And I know like there's a lot of talk about like the subconscious and healing the subconscious and all that stuff. So how you just said that 5% of our mind is conscious, meaning that that is the part that we're aware of when you and I are having this conversation, and it's our conscious mind that's having this conversation right now. But there's like 95% of our mind that's like active doing stuff that we're not aware of. So what does that like, is that how you would describe it? Or where does like the subconscious mind, where do you even begin to heal or to begin to examine that whole 95% that's living there that you don't even know exists?
Wow, that is a really good question. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of info in the sense that, on any given moment, we are receiving, is it 2.3 million bytes of information a second? So, our brains are in literal overload all day long. We receive more information in one day than somebody 100 years ago did in their entire lifetime. So our brains are constantly being bombarded with information. What happens is we have all these filters that we can delete, distort, or generalize so that we can take that information that we're receiving through all of our five senses, we delete, we distort, we generalize it, and now we have significantly less information that we are sorting through. So what we think happens is that we think we've distorted, deleted, and generalizing so that we are only looking at the information that's important. What's happening though is our subconscious mind still stores it. It still has that information that's there. And so our conscious mind is our goal setter. Like we're great at setting goals as humans. but the subconscious mind is the goal getter. It is the one that is deciding if you're going to get it, how you're going to go after it, what stories and beliefs that you're buying into. That subconscious mind is literally built up until the age of 8 years old, but it also stores information from generations past as well. So when we talk about trauma being stored in our body, I know that this is a spiritual podcast, but this is also a conversation that some people are like, what? It's very fascinating when you really understand how we are storing trauma from generations. That is deep within our subconscious. So most people aren't even aware of what's there until it becomes a case that you start to look at your life and story that maybe has been on repeat, and you think, I don't know why I'm not hitting these goals. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. We start to make it mean something about us, or we start to believe that maybe I can't achieve that. And that was a story I spent most of my life telling myself, is that that's great that works for them, but this is obviously my life, and this is obviously what I have. But then I would also cover it with a very pretty positive. So the positive, the conscious, like that we're doing the affirmations and all those things, they're important. But if deep down you don't believe that to be true, you are creating this friction within you it's no wonder you're not bringing things to life, because you don't believe that it is possible for you. So they can be in a battle. I often say if your conscious mind and your subconscious mind is in a tug of war, the subconscious wins every time, because it's 95% of who you are. It will win every single time. So how do we get to the root of it is when we're working with clients. A lot of times in the coaching industry, we think our job as a coach is to tell the client what the answer is. And that's actually not it, because that's how I see the world through my lens. That's my internal representation. Our job, in my belief as a coach, is to ultimately use our languaging skills to ask better questions of our client to get to the root of their own beliefs, so that we can start to uncover what they are believing is possible, maybe what the limitations are. So for example, right, a client's like, I want to build a business that looks like XYZ. I want $10,000 a month. And I'm like, why do you want that? And they're like, well, I don't know. That's what she has for her goal, or that's what they do for theirs. But what do you want? And sometimes when you start to get to the root of some of the questions, what a person wants, they don't even know what they want, because they're so, again, bombarded with information. So with NLP, we are able to use our power of languaging to get to the root of people's desires, what they want, what their beliefs are, so that we can change those stories at the roots and at the belief. And then what we do in NLP is there's a lot of different submodalities and tools that we use, so many tools and techniques that we can help to change a client's beliefs to support themselves at the subconscious level.
Love it. Yeah, it really comes down to those stories, right? So those, like that 95%, the subconscious mind over time starts to create stories. And I know that, we've talked about this, how it really is done in order to protect us. It's always, the subconscious mind is there to keep us safe. So it's not like it's creating stories to harm us. It's creating stories to keep us safe but we're not really aware of them. And so you've got all these underlying stories that are happening that you may not be aware of. And so in bringing more kind of tapping into that root of the subconscious mind, you have an opportunity to rewrite those stories. Is that the way that you would explain it?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it, and most people are not aware of them. They are not actually. And in fact, I also want to paint it in a different way, in a sense that it's not just about a limitation, right? Like it's not just a belief about a limitation that I can't do that, that's not for me. It's also what happens is so many women, I'm going to say women for a second, are also very fearful of success. I want to create this, but if I do that, it's going to come at a cost, and I'm going to lose my health. I'm going to lose my relationships. I'm like, oh, wow, when did you decide that? Like, when did you? So that's a question, right? When did you decide that? And it's always that well, I don't know when I decided that. Well, I'm like, somewhere you made a decision that you can't have success without it fitting in X, Y, and Z models. And it's so interesting because what happens is just a question like that is interrupting a pattern. The only way we can change a subconscious limiting belief is we have to consciously interrupt the pattern. So first we have to see it, like consciously interrupt the pattern, ask ourselves if it's true, look for evidence where it's not true, right? Because we all have evidence, we just don't see it. We tend to focus on remember the things that didn't work out versus what does work out. And then we can rewrite it in a new empowering way. The thing is with NLP is we have a lot of different techniques where we can actually work to get to the root of that. One of the things is called flip the script that we do, and it's timeline work. So our subconscious mind remembers everything. Even if you can't consciously remember it, it does remember everything. And so we can take a client through a flip the script technique where we are learning to release like the stuck emotions of, anger, sadness, fear, shame, guilt, hurt. And they can be anywhere, but most often they're anywhere under the age of 7 or 8 years old. Sometimes they're in the womb, sometimes they're generational or past lives. And I'm the first person, trust me, I spent my entire life in the masculine. So when I heard that the first time, I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous. Like that's absolutely ridiculous. Until I experienced it and I was like, oh, wow. So if I can give an example that I find is very relatable, I really struggled with comparison for a long time. I thought that it was if I put better boundaries on social media, if I was aware of what was triggering me, that's why I was falling into comparison. It took going through a breakthrough day and really doing the deep subconscious work to recognize that my story of comparison comes back from like when I was 5 years old and I heard something and I interpreted it to mean something. So this, again, might sound silly to some people. You don't have to have a big trauma to have a limiting belief at the subconscious level. It's your perception or something that you take on to mean something. And then all of a sudden, what happens over our lifetime is we continue to get confirmation that, yeah, that belief is true. Oh, that belief is true. And we don't even realize it's happening. And then all of a sudden, comparison became a benchmark for me that I was using to measure up to everyone, except that it was taking my eyes off of what I was doing myself. So it's really powerful work when you can get to the root of what those stories are and create that change. What it's done for me personally, it's created a level of peace that I didn't know was possible.
And peace is what it's all about. Yeah, I love the example that you share too with like, someone who is building a business. And I feel like oftentimes we don't, we think we want something, we're working towards it, and then it's not happening. So then we kind of just blame ourselves, or we just assume that we're not, we're lacking in some way, when it really is a story that we've created that we may not be aware of. And I think that that is such a great, like, these stories that we create are usually, again, to kind of keep us safe. Right. So it could be like for women that, well, it's not safe for me to be more successful than my spouse, because that's going to create, like, maybe you've created a story where something happened, something was said, and that kind of built upon something that may have happened before that when you were younger. So it's pretty amazing how we can be, self-sabotaging ourselves without really ever quite realizing it. So I found the work to be very liberating, because to me, once you realize it, then it's like, oh, I get to rewrite the story. Like that I have control over. Maybe in the past I didn't, but now that I see it, I get to rewrite the story. And that is ultimately where we can create those shifts and make those changes in our life.
100%. And when you do that, you then create you give this permission slip for other women to do the same, right? We are literally, I believe every day we are rewriting rules in life and business. I think that we are, I had, we all have somebody, for example, in our family who gives us a story. That's their story. And I recently heard another family member say this story that, you have to continue to pay your dues, and you need to burn as hard as you can in order to have success. And I remember standing there thinking, I actually did take that story on for most of my life. Yeah. And then I sat there and went, you know what? That's actually not my story. It's actually not my story now, because I didn't want to buy into that story anymore. And that's because we all have different levels and different definitions of success. I think it's really important. So many times they'll ask clients, what is your definition of success? Do you know what? Most people don't have a clue. It's tied to money, or it's because that's measurable. And instead, when we can get into the work of NLP, we can get into questions, and really deep questions with a client, where it can start to uncover, actually, what do I want? What do I actually want? Because you will never find peace in what you're going after if it's actually not what you want, right? You can say, I want that $10,000 a month. And first off, if you don't address the subconscious beliefs that you can't have that, you will reach $9,999, and you'll self-sabotage it because you don't see that yourself hitting that. So it's really important to get to those beliefs of what you are feeling. And ultimately, you could take every single belief you could take a room full of women, take every single belief that they have, put them in a pot, boil it down. It's going to come down to not enough, right? Not enough, not worthy enough, not feeling enough. And that is an internal feeling that we have to work on. No one can change that for us. We can pour belief into others, which is beautiful, right? We have incredible women in our life who will pour into us. If we don't allow ourselves to receive it, if we don't allow ourselves to feel worthy enough to receive it, then that story doesn't change. So there has to come a point where you decide that that's not my story anymore. I don't know what it is yet, but that's not my story.
Yeah. And I loved how you said, it really comes down to disrupting the pattern, right? First kind of recognizing it, and then disrupting the pattern. And to me, that feels very empowering, right? Because there's power in knowing that we can disrupt that pattern.
And can I share one little thing on that? Because you're exactly right. The thing is that when you learn how to disrupt that pattern, get ready, because you're going to have to do it on repeat. You're not doing it wrong if you have to do it all the time. I just really want you to know that you're not doing it wrong if you have to do it all the time. We have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. 80 to 90% are the same as I've had for the last how many other days, and 90% are negative. So when it feels wait, do I have to do this all the time? And I always say to a client, do you think every day? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, yep, you do. You do. You'll just get faster at it though. It gets easier. You're going to catch it and you're going to see it. But every time you are up leveling to a new goal in your business, a new project, something that is a stretch and discomfort, because our subconscious mind wants us safe. Every time you're reaching for something new, you just need to be ready that those beliefs pop right back up again. And you're like, wow, I thought I did this already. But every time you're doing something new, they come with you. So the better I feel, it's important to not resist them, to build a better relationship with them, and just recognize it's not because you can't do it. It's because your subconscious mind just wants to keep you safe and protected.
Yeah. In meditation, I sort of, will refer to it as the practice of coming back, because you're always having to come back to the present moment. You're always, yes, you're going to be pulled in your thoughts, and then it's recognizing it and coming back. And that's what the whole practice of meditation is. And that spills into our life in terms of healing. We're always, it's a full-time job to heal. You and I have had some laughs about that too. I think people hope and maybe in demystifying this NLP, it's also recognizing what it is and what it isn't. And what it isn't is it's not a quick fix. And I feel sometimes people think there's no quick fix to anything. I think it has the potential to open up a whole new level of awareness and healing. And as you just said, it's every day, multiple times a day. These stories were built over time through repetition, and they're healed over time through repetition.
decades.
Yeah.
I like to bring a sense of humor. I literally just stop it. I used to resist it or shame myself. And I can tell you that's one way to keep it alive is if you're going
Yeah.
to shame yourself for having those limiting beliefs. And I just bring the sense of humor. And I'm like, wow, Marsha, that didn't take long. That's back again, isn't it? Wow, that's interesting. I see you. And I just bring a sense of humor and it makes it fun and light. And it allows me to recognize that I can coexist with it. It's part of me and
Mm.
it's made me who I am. I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm actually, that workhorse that I spent my life being, the one who burnt out constantly, who lived in her masculine, I resented a lot of that for a long time because I didn't know how to change out of that. And it's so interesting because now I just look and think, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that I did learn that way and I did live that way because now I know the power of not having to live life that way and
Yeah.
the freedom of allowing more of my intuitive and my feminine side to be able to come out into the world, which still, I don't know if I can still say without laughing at myself a little bit because it's so different. But it's important and I think so. I just want to share that, like, don't resent those parts of yourself. Like, you are today a collection of everything you've lived and walked through. So it's made you who you are. And I think when we can celebrate that and the growth is very freeing at the same time too.
I loved how you used the word coexist, to coexist with it. And that is, it's this relationship with
Yeah.
your subconscious, your thoughts, whether they're conscious or, coming from your subconscious, but to coexist with it to me is comes from a place of self-love and compassion versus coming from this place of judgment. So
Yeah.
beautiful way to look at it. And now I didn't go back to the whole idea of like how we store trauma from past generations, but that is like, because that's a whole other episode. I really believe that. And I have found it to be so transformative, and it's amazing how we just don't know where so much of our feelings come from, and we always try to, part of where I feel sometimes we're held back is that we try to intellectualize things to make sense of things, right, from that 5% conscious mind,
Yep.
when so
Yep.
much of it is beyond our even capability of understanding. So when we can kind of let go of trying to understand where everything comes from, and to me that's not what healing is. It's more just allowing and trusting and inviting that surrendering piece to it as well. And when you know that, it's like, oh, I'm holding on to something that's not even mine. And it's not even like from this lifetime. It's from,
It's powerful. It's really
generations. It's
powerful.
so powerful.
Yeah.
It gives you
It's
that
so
permission to
powerful.
let go of so many things that you're holding on to that are not yours to keep anymore.
No, it's so, I love what you shared there. And healing is we're never done because we're always growing and expanding and putting ourselves into, new containers. It's uncomfortable growth. And so we're always experiencing some level. Those are our shadows, whether you want to call our limiting beliefs part of our shadows, that they're not a bad thing. But they're always coming with us. And so it's this duality that it's always there, right? Like these pieces of us are always there. So why not build a better relationship with it and recognize, like, I think it's very important that we recognize our limiting beliefs or our shadows that pop up because you'll see them faster, right? This,
Hmm.
the better relationship you can build with them, you will see them faster. You will be able to, learn how to work with it and move with it at the same time. It is really powerful work when you learn how to embody it and move through life with it. And I know that through that work, I can say, like, my relationships have changed. I have built incredible connections with other people because I'm allowing those parts of myself to be seen now. Like, I'm allowing myself to share those parts of myself. And it's just, yeah, it's hard to put into words, but I'll tell you, it has been very profound for me. And I'm so grateful that life led me this way to finally learn this work.
Beautiful. I know you just said this the part of your work is really also in supporting other people to share their stories. And you've named your program Outspoken. You are also as you mentioned, like a publisher. So you're helping not only people like write their stories, but share their stories, heal their stories. So where does that come from? Like, why this commitment or this desire to help other people become outspoken?
I think it is one of those, I love this question. And I think it's one of those things that I can look back and see the dots connecting now. I didn't see it then. Years ago, I was a parent dealing with teen substance abuse. I felt beyond isolated and alone. Shame was like ruling my entire life. I felt like I was definitely my biggest critic. I was hard on myself. And through a lot of work and support, I came to a space of deciding to share my story because I felt like I was the only person in the world who was experiencing this. And it wasn't until I started to share it that I found not only was I not alone, I mean, there was thousands of other parents and other families that were experiencing this story. And stepping into that work, using my voice, sharing my story, writing collaborative chapters, I then hit around 2016 and decided that I wanted to write my own book. And I remember being so clear. I had an intuitive download. It took me many years later to understand that's what it was, but it's very much an intuitive download that you are here to write your book. And I was like, okay, I think that's what that means. And I remember telling everyone else in my life, and there was no one except my husband who thought it was a good idea. And I thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't. I thought, no, it's a very strong pull. So even then in sharing the stories, I still didn't see it yet, put my book out into the world. And then I led a couple more collaborative books. What I was finding is that some of the best connections that I was building came from our mess and our stories. Like it was really that we are so much more alike than different. We're so much more connected than we think we are. And we don't have to walk the same story in order to feel the connection, because the majority of my clients don't have my story at all. But what they do recognize is I know those feelings. I know those emotions. I know what that feels like to feel like that. And I really started to feel that what if we could allow people to share more of their stories? So then I launched a collaborative book that went in 2020 called Owning Your Choices. 2022 was Every Body Holds a Story. And I was really diving into helping people to write and share their stories. And then NLP was happening at the same time. And it's so funny because, again, speak of being divinely guided, I was seeing that my life was compartmentalized. We write books over here, we do podcasts over here, we do NLP over here, and I don't know how to make them all tie together. And it wasn't until I started to do more of this work that I was like, oh, they're all connected. I see it now, and I see how they're connected. So that's really what I started to feel, that if I could help others to see their stories differently, to stop shaming themselves and criticizing themselves for the experiences and the stories that they've had, and recognize that if they could see their story differently, reframe it, and look at it with a different lens, they would recognize that they are perfectly designed to help the person that they once were. Like, they are perfectly imperfect in their design in order to do the work that they're here to do. And when I can help people to shift that and reframe that and see it in a different light, the ripple effect is huge. Not to coin a term that everybody uses, but it really is, because all of a sudden now your story is reaching somebody else who then it turns on a light for them that they get to share theirs, and it just continues from there. So it's been such a joy in my life to see so many people come together and share stories that maybe they wouldn't have thought of doing before. Like sharing parts of themselves vulnerably. You've been on calls with me where we've seen things happen that I'm like, wow, I could not have planned on that. The way that somebody opened up and shared from a beautiful lens, right? From a lens of, I want to do something good with the hardest experience I've had in my life. Those are my people. Those are the people that I see them. And by using this work and sharing stories, I just think we can make an incredible impact by helping so many other people.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you said, your story is unique, but the shame that you've experienced, which you've spoken about a bit, is something that is universal in the sense that most people have had experiences of shame in their life, and that is like that one emotion that we are just so ashamed of, right? Like that we want to hide, that we want to run away from. And so, and you having the courage to really share that story in such a beautiful, vulnerable way, it really does open up the conversation and the connection with other people in, such a beautiful and unique way. And did you find it to be, I know that it's impacted a lot of other people, but how was it healing for yourself personally to share that story? Because I can just imagine that there were a lot of moments of self-doubt before you actually published it. Like, what am I doing?
I, I love that question. I didn't know that, sharing my story, building confidence and using my voice and connecting it to support other people. I didn't know the amount of healing that I needed to experience, and I had no idea that that would be a incredibly powerful byproduct of what I was doing. I had no idea. I thought, at that point, I felt very isolated and alone, very. And I often look back and think, what was I logically thinking to write a book and share it at the time that we were walking through what we were walking through? And I do believe I shared it and left my kids in full integrity, because I think it's really important that when you're sharing difficult stories, you leave others in integrity. If you can't do it, that's probably not a part of your story to share, because vulnerability is about us. And so during that process, writing the book was way more healing for me than I could have ever planned on it being. And through the process of, doing that and sharing the stories and podcasting and putting it out there was just so many levels of healing that I was walking through. And, I know healing is a big word for somebody who might not fully understand it in a sense. But the thing is that I was really good at reacting to life. Like, I had a lot of fire. I had a lot of fire in me. I still like the fire in me, don't get me wrong. But it's this thing that I was reacting to everything in life. And that was a badge of honor. I thought that was like, don't fight me, because I will come at you with everything that I have. But the thing is that fighter in me was breaking me down, because I was fighting every battle in the world that wasn't mine. And at the root of all of that, being completely vulnerable, was this soul who was trying to prove her worth, is literally what she was doing. And when you're trying to prove your worth, you don't approve of yourself. I'm sorry to say that, but somebody said that to me once, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was true. So when I see the proving energy show up to me, I'm like, ooh, there's something there that I need to work on a little bit more, because that's not a healed energy space to work from. That's draining. So even though I was really good at, fighting these battles and going after things, it didn't come from a very calm space. And so instead now of fighting all the battles, I can look at many things and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's not my story to fight, or that's not my battle, or that's not mine. Things don't have the same charge that they used to. When life has a charge constantly, you're not coming from a healed space. And there's a lot of inner work that you're being asked to do. You don't have to do it. Nobody has to do anything, but you're being asked. I believe our soul is asking for us to do this work, because the peace and compassion and grace that I believe I had spent my life searching for was never coming from that person who was fighting every single battle and constantly in a space of trigger. Now, when the trigger shows up, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What do I need to learn right now? What am I being asked to listen to? It's not reactive. It's curious. It's inquisitive. It's like, what am I being asked to do? And that is such a calmer, healed space that, so again, I think all this work has allowed me to heal in ways I didn't even know I needed. I had no idea that I needed to. And you'll also recognize that when you come up against, triggers that you've had in your whole life, and all of a sudden your reaction to them is completely different. And you stop and it's like, oh wow, that is definitely interesting. I responded completely differently from how I would have in the past. That is a beautiful space of healed energy that, again, I'm just smiling a little bit and laughing at myself because that is not something I was searching for, something I didn't know that I needed. And I spent my life in the masculine, just push it down, move forward, just grit only through life. And when you live that way, you miss a lot. You do miss a lot. I missed a lot of connections, a lot of, close connections, allowing my heart to be seen in full transparency. I didn't know how to do that. That felt too vulnerable. That was scary. And now it's like I just live life in a very different way. And I'm grateful for all of those lessons. Don't get me wrong. They've taught me so much, but I know I'm coming from a very different energy space right now.
Yeah, it's like dropping that armor, right? Like before you were like, you have the armor ready for battle. And yes, you were fighting
Yeah.
and it worked, right? It
Yeah.
did what it needed to do. And so that is such an it's and that's the part that's like not the easy part to remove the armor because you feel more, right? It's not that things get easier or it's not that circumstances change. I can imagine, would have been feeling even more without all of the armor, yet here you are, so much stronger.
That's a really good point. And I want to share, the armor, everybody can relate to the armor. I did a big talk this year on the armor. The thing is that to give it in context, there was a 5 or 6 year old version of me who used that armor because it protected her at a time when life was very difficult. The thing is that I'm not that 5 or 6 year old girl. I don't need the armor in the way that I did then, but I spent my life carrying it, so I thought I was supposed to. That's what subconscious is. That's what subconscious work is that something that you learned from when you were younger, it served you in that time, but you were also developing. And so you build this belief that that's the only way to do life because that's how you did it then. So you don't even realize, right, that this little 8-year-old girl is driving the car of your life and you're in this space of thinking like, why am I doing this? It's because these beliefs are constantly on repeat that are there. So you do have to consciously interrupt them, break them, and build a new belief. Like you create space to build a new belief system.
I love that. And thank you. And I so appreciate how open and willing to share. And I know that in your book, when she stopped asking why, people listening can certainly even learn more of your story. And I wish that we had even more time. But what would you say to maybe someone who's listening who is feeling like they're right, like in that space where you would have felt at certain times where you feel like is there any hope or where do I even start can I even release this armor? What would you say to someone who is maybe in the thick of it right now?
I think that if you're in the thick of it right now, I want you to know that you are not alone in your journey and in your story. It feels like it, and it feels like it because we don't like to talk about the difficult things in life. But I promise you that you're not alone in your story. And you might be listening to, for example, the journey that I've been on and sharing a story. And I want you to know it started with literally one step one day. It's literally just one step one day. I didn't have a big picture in mind. I didn't even have a business in mind. I was trying to find a way to survive a really difficult life situation. And it morphed and changed into what it is today. But it started with one step at a time and recognizing it was somebody who said to me, what if how did she say this? She said, do you feel you've made it through the most difficult parts of your story? And I said, yes, I actually feel like, it's not perfect, but I can handle it better than I used to. And she said, well, I think you have an obligation to share how to do that. And for me personally, that was a moment that I went, oh my gosh, I do. I feel like I do. And it wasn't out of obligation, but it was the standpoint that it gave me purpose. To be able to do something good with the most difficult thing in my life gave me purpose. And that purpose gave me fuel. So it might be something in there. The other thing I would say is if you're feeling really stuck in your life right now, in your story, in your circumstances, what can you control? Are you controlling your own controllables, right? And you cannot fix, manage, or control anyone. I spent my life trying. Trust me, you can't. And are you controlling your controllables? And what are the words that you're saying to yourself? Because they have far more power than you think that they do. They have far more power than you think that they do. And so if you can find ways to catch your language and speak in the direction of where you're moving versus where you've been, don't be shocked at how much in your life will change, because you're directing your life by the thoughts that you're thinking and the words that you're speaking. And if you're only ever replaying the past, speaking of the negatives, pointing out the things that went wrong, that is what you will see more of, because you're training your brain to look for that. Instead, watch that language and speak more about what you do want in your life. And you might be saying, okay, I don't even know what I want, because everything I have in my life right now is not working. Then the last thing I would say is speak into the language of what you want versus what you don't want. And I mean this in a sense of don't speak negatives. So if you are saying negatives, your subconscious mind does not know negatives. So you are asking for more of what you don't want. Don't think of a purple elephant. What do you think of? You think of a purple elephant. Saying, I don't want debt, your mind does not understand don't. You will see the word debt. So it's like that languaging is really powerful, and it can help you to create shifts in your life. And that might be just enough to move you one more step, one more day, one more day. And all of a sudden, you can then start to create your own momentum to create change.
I love that. And that is something that is something that's doable, right? Because often, and it's amazing how we're kind of wired to speak into the reality of what is. So we like to reaffirm how bad things are, reaffirm everything, and then all we're doing is compounding the current reality. And our mind has a negativity bias, so it's always going to be looking at all the negative stuff that's going on. So it really does take purpose and intention to speak into the good things that are happening, or the good things that you want to create or breathe life into it. Love, love that. Thank you for sharing. And would you say, like you mentioned, the whole idea of, one thing that has helped you, or you were encouraging listeners in terms of like what your belief and your purpose, the purpose that you realized was a part of your story. It's kind of, it for me personally brings to mind just the idea that we do have a purpose. For some reason, our soul is here, and everyone is unique, and we have different lessons that we're here to learn and to experience. And so it does, to me, having the belief that there is a greater energy at play gives me some, a certain form of hope, I guess, maybe is the word. So how would you define, and this is my just last question as we end this podcast, but what does spirituality mean to you? I mean, it is the Spiritually Wired podcast, but what would you define that energy? And is it something that is an important part of your life?
First off, it's an incredibly important part, and it's something I didn't even know how important it was until, I would say, even over the last couple of years. Even though I felt, if I can look back, I know I was guided many times over. I know that I was being like pointed in this direction. I personally, spiritually, and feeling guided and supported, what it means to me is like allowing myself to be guided and supported, allowing myself to receive support and help from others, allowing myself to ask for help, and allowing myself to believe that I'm being guided. There was a point when I didn't know what I was going to do many years ago, and I was like, I don't know how, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to see this story. I don't want to be part of it. And I heard this. I've had many downloads and heard many messages over my lifetime. And I heard this message of, Marsha, you know what to do. You don't like the answers, but you know what to do. And that has always been a benchmark for me, is it's like, wait, do I actually know what to do? And it's like, oh, I know what to do. I don't like the answers. So, but I do know what to do. So I deep down believe that I'm always being guided and supported, and I need to give myself time and space to tap into that. I do believe intuition is like a muscle. And I think that the more of a relationship you can build with that and create space and freedom for that download to happen, then the more connected you're going to become to it. Right? And it can be as simple as just testing your intuition on a daily basis to build a relationship with it. But I would say I have a very strong relationship with it now. And to even hear myself say that I feel very spiritually guided is not something I think I would have expected myself to say many years ago. But I also know that it's been there for a long time. I just wasn't listening. I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't listening. And now that I have removed a lot of those old stories and those old beliefs, like I just feel that there's so much possible. And I feel like I'm being divinely guided right now with the direction that I'm supposed to be following. So I'm so grateful for being able to share that openly. So thank you, Renee, and for having this conversation. And I'm grateful for the guidance and the support. I really am.
Beautiful. And it really is kind of a language thing too, right? The words that we use, and it's that the belief's always there, but then as we explore it more, we start to create a story around it, not a false story, but you start to really realize what those beliefs are. And it's so interesting. Like I find it's this place of exploration, right? To me, spirituality is not this set thing. It's just being open and being curious and exploring, how we feel, what resonates as truth for us now, because that's the other thing, is that can change at different moments. And so we want to keep that fluid. But I love your answer. And I am just so grateful that you are here. Honestly, there is about 20 other things I would ask, but we're going to keep it at this and we'll make sure to have you on again. So I want to thank you. And where is the best? So we're going to link all of your information in the show notes, but for people, what is the best way to connect with you, Marsha, for listeners who may want to learn more about what you offer and the different certifications?
The easiest thing, you heard how long my last name is. So everything is Marsha Van W. My website's Marsha Van W. Instagram is that. Social media is all Marsha Van W. And probably by the time this releases, there will be a freebie that I've put out after the event this weekend that I'm speaking at. And I created a hypnosis and subliminal bundle on You Are Supported and how to connect to your higher self. Again, even just thinking that I did that is just like, wow, that's so interesting, right? We have to honor our growth and our journey, but it's a beautiful hypnosis on connecting to your higher self. And I believe when you allow yourself to connect to your higher self, you will see how supported you are and feel how supported you are. So that will be, I'll make sure that you have a link to that as well. But anywhere Marsha Van W or Google, you will find me. My podcast, Own Your Choices, Own Your Life, is in the 760 something episodes. I have no idea right now, somewhere up there. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
And I had the pleasure of being a guest recently. So
yes,
you do
it's
such
so
a great
good.
job. Well, thank you, Marsha. I really appreciate it again. And thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Wired. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. It really makes a big difference for the podcast. And if you're ready to dive deeper and join a soul-led community, come be a part of the Spiritually Wired membership. With weekly live lessons and a rich library of recorded classes, it's designed to support you every step of the way on your spiritual journey. We currently have a special offer where you can receive your first month for half the price. You can find a link in the show notes or come check it out at reneewalkerwellness.com. Until next time, remember to take some deep breaths. Remember that you are spiritually wired.